Alright guys, so in 1981 Halloween 2 came out and we got our finishing story with Michael Myers and Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis, and the Halloween series was dead and never returned. Ever. And we got these set of anthology films starting with Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which I really would have wondered what would have happened if we got more of these films, more of these anthology films. And I think the reason why this failed so incredibly hard is because there were two Halloween films with Michael Myers. If it was only one and there wasn't a Halloween 2, then there would have probably been a bigger difference. It would not have been as much as a blow to the head as having two movies with Michael Myers and then having this one-off movie that, if you're a casual movie person, like, you would look at this movie like, what the fuck is this? Why on earth does this exist? Halloween 3, like, it doesn't relate to Michael Myers or any of the other movies. And the thing is that they want, like, John Carpenter, like, after the second Halloween, they're like, we're done with the story of Michael Myers. Him, Laurie, and Loomis, they're all gone. Loomis and Michael are dead. Like, they died in the fire at the end of part 2. So we're going to do something different with the Halloween name, which to me is incredibly ballsy. This, in 1982, whenever this came out, this was one of, I feel like this is one of the most ballsiest moves for a franchise ever. Of course, it failed, incredibly failed, but I have got to get them props for this, because this movie is not, like, they tried their hardest to make this not a Halloween movie. Like, a Halloween movie, I mean, like, as in the Michael Myers 2 movies before this. And they even point out in the movie, they show a trailer on TV for John Carpenter's Halloween. So it's not even in the same universe as the first two. So if it was, that might have been a tiny bit different, but it's not even related to that, which I thought was really crazy. But this movie was originally going to be eventually a group set of anthology movies, like with the Halloween name, around Halloween. And Halloween 3, the thing I love is that this movie, out of all of the Halloween movies in the franchise, this one has to be set on Halloween. The first one was not technically even set on Halloween whenever it was being conceived as the Babysitter Murders. It wasn't even a thought. But then John Carpenter came in and decided to make it revolve around Halloween. So Halloween is inserted in that movie, even though it's flawlessly inserted, as you wouldn't have felt like it wasn't like that in the first place with the first movie. But in this movie, you have to have it on Halloween. Everything they do involves the holiday, involves Sam Hain, it involves these witches, it involves all of these things that you couldn't take Halloween out of the equation for this movie, and that's what makes this movie, I think, the most Halloweenish movie of the franchise, of course, because, like I said, the first one didn't have to be set on Halloween until Carpenter came in and made it that way, but this one has to be. It has to be on that holiday. It has to connect, and they really tried their hardest to make it on, like, set on Halloween in this movie. And I'm gonna go through basic plot and talk about what I like and don't like. But I really like that this does the tradition like the first two, where it has the opening pumpkin scene with the amazing score. And the score in the pumpkin in this is a digital pumpkin, like it's a digital picture image being created of pixels, which is a really cool touch. That's a really interesting way to change up while using the same style of pumpkin, like using a pumpkin in the intro. Like, that's really cool. That really makes it, like, it makes it feel like it's part of these films, even though it's not in the same universe. But I like how it feels like it's got that type of similarity to it. It really does feel like, even though it's not related to the other films, it feels like it connects. And because of the score, Alan Howarth, and Dean Cundy's cinematography, like, it looks like the first two, even though it's not related to the first two. And that's what I love, in which the first 4 Halloween movies I feel like have the best cinematography and look very similar to each other and give off this vibe where the other films don't. And I guess you could say Part 6 too. Part 6 has some really good cinematography, but though these films, like the first four, I feel like give off such a very distinct look and a scary look to them. And this one carries that too. It has a very creepy look to it because of Dean Cundy's cinematography. Like, he is fantastic, and I love how he was brought back to do this one from after the first two. Like, it's great. And the score is great. It's a different score. It's not as memorable as the Halloween theme, but it still is really good. It still works. And it still gives off such a creepy vibe for this movie and for this story. And I like how after the pumpkin opening credits, it starts out where it's Saturday the 23rd. So it's literally more than a week before Halloween. And this is really cool because this movie does it to where you see, like, is it 8 or 9 days, 8 days before October 31st, you see all this build up, and it does a great job of building it up with showing all these days and everything happening in each day. That it made it different than the first two, and it actually is cool because it felt like you were on like a timer, because if you watch the ending, you know what's coming, the inevitable doom, but it's cool showing that timer of like, today's the 23rd, 24th, 25th, blah blah blah, and then it goes on to Halloween. And I really liked that. I thought that was really cool. And then we get the opening chase, which this guy, Mr. Grimbridge, who you'll realize later is like, he's like a store owner, and he is getting this mask for Halloween, but he's running away from the androids, which of course you don't know they're androids at the moment whenever it starts, but that opening chase is really cool. That's a fun opening chase, and I liked how it does a long wide shot of like that Mr. Grimbridge running towards the camera from a very far distance while a vehicle's chasing him. So in a way it still has that feel like Michael Myers in the first two, where like he's driving a car and following somebody, or these androids walk in a way that Michael walks, and they stand in position like Michael, where they're in the shadows or they're just standing there creepily. Like, I like how they make this similar to the first two, but it doesn't completely flat out copy it. I thought that really makes this movie just cool in how it homages to the first two, but doesn't copy it completely. I think that's really cool. And I think that opening chase is really good, and I think that whenever like he defeats the androids, but like one of them gets like hit by a car that goes down a hill and like crushes one of the guys, but then like he runs away, Mr. Grimbridge, and goes into this gas station, which I like how this gas station goes full circle in this movie, because at the end of the movie, it's at the end of the movie as well, but it's like it does do a full circle thing with that, with the gas station, which is a weird thing to go full circle on in terms of a story, but I like how they do that. It's at the beginning you see it, and at the very end, it's at the very end of the movie whenever the ending happens. But Mr. Grimmage runs in to that gas station, and guy falls over, and before he goes in, that guy at the gas station is watching on TV about Stonehenge, which I thought was really funny because it's foreshadowing for later whenever you see what they're actually doing with Stonehenge. And that's really cool. That's a really cool way of subtly showing that this is what's going to happen later in the movie, and it pays off. I really think that's really cool. And then like he gets taken to the hospital by the gas station guy, and then one of those androids is still there watching, and it does a shoulder shot like Michael, like in the first film. That's pretty cool. And then it introduces us to Tom Atkins' character, Dr. Chalice, who is a very different lead character, because like Tom Atkins as an actor, I do think he's a cool actor. He's a really fun like actor. He seems like a cool person. But almost all the roles I have seen him in, like say The Fog too, where like he is just kind of a womanizer, and it's I don't know what to think about it. Like, it's funny, but it's also like he's kind of a douche, like, to all these people. But the actor's got such a likability to him that I feel like it makes it work for me, because Tom Atkins, I think what I've seen him in, he does a good job of being likable. And in this movie, it's no different, because he is really likable in this. He's really likable, even though he's a man whore. Like, it's hilarious though, but he just kind of, like, basically just fawns over a woman, and it makes it seem like he could be a horrible person, but like the performance is just likable. Like, he's a likable human being, the way he acts towards everybody. And I know that sounds kind of weird just saying that out loud, but Tom Atkins is great as usual, and I think he's really great in this movie, and I like him as this new main character, like, because he's just such a different one, especially compared to Laurie Strode, this shy girl from the first two who encounters this killer and is running around scared. Which, I love Laurie Strode, but I think that it's cool seeing a different character in this movie, a different lead. And I like that you get introduced to him, and of course it's the scene where the android comes in and kills Mr. Grimbridge, which is a cool death, where like all he does is put his fingers out like this, and what he does is grab his nose, twist it, and then yank it out. Like, not even yank it out of his skin, but just yank the nose up. And that was some cool effects work. That was really gruesome. I was like, wow, okay. Because these androids are apparently so strong that they could literally just rip the nose off out of its socket. Like, that's really cool. So Dr. Chalice chases after him, and then he goes into the car, the android, and then lights himself on fire and blows up the car. Which, if you're watching this not knowing that they're androids, you're just like, what the fuck? Like, this just is so weird. And I really thought that it's a cool build-up to see that they are androids. Like, you don't know what they are. You just know that they're following these people for some reason, some creepy reason, but I really enjoyed that. And I like, too, how whenever you get Dr. Chalice's family, like, whenever you go to his family, you realize that Nancy Loomis is his wife. Who she and Jamie Lee Curtis get the credit of being in all three of the first films, even though Jamie Lee Curtis is just the announcer for the Santa Mira town in this movie. Like, she's the announcer, and Nancy Loomis is the wife of Dr. Chalice. But I like that they both are giving credit to being in the first three. I think that's funny, that even though they're not, like, this isn't a Michael Myers sequel, but they're still in it. That's a really funny way to keep them into this franchise, at least in the first three films. And I think that, like, I noticed too, whenever the hospital scene, that the hospital is the same as Halloween 2. I thought that was really funny, because it looked very similar. It just looked like it was more lighted, because in Halloween 2 it was in the dark a lot of the movie. And I think it looks very close to it. Is that the same hospital? I believe it is, or at least some parts of it feel like the same hospital. Which is funny, because they use a lot of the same things from the last two movies. I think that's cool that they keep a lot of their things, whether it's actors like Jamie Lee Curtis or Nancy Loomis, or having sets like the Halloween 2 set. And there's also a set later in the movie where, after Dr. Chalice talks to Ellie, talks on the phone to his wife later, whenever he leaves with Ellie, that place where he's talking on the phone is the place in Halloween 2 where Michael Myers encounters the kid in the boombox saying, Laurie Strode's been taken to the hospital. Like, that's the same location in that movie. So I like that they keep using, at least in the first three movies, they use the same elements, like actors or locations, and use them in a cool way. That's cool that they connect those in that way. Like, they use their same resources in a cool, interesting way for the first three films. Because after that, it's not the same. But, because it's different people working on each film afterwards. But I liked how, after Mr. Grimbridge gets killed, you get introduced to Ellie, who is a likable lead as well. Ellie Grimbridge, his daughter. Now, I like how she's this spunky girl who loses her father, and she wants to find out the mystery of why he's gone, like why he got killed. Like, there's got to be a reason. Does he have any demons? Like, what's going on? And I like that that gives Dr. Chalice a way to say, hey, let's go together, you know? But I thought that she was a likable character. I like that she really does give off a likability and sincerity to like the role. Like I really do enjoy her. I think she's a really underrated like character in the franchise because of course this is from Halloween 3, which is the film that is reviled because it's not related to Michael Myers, even though there are fucking worse sequels than this movie. And this movie, I think, is one of the best Halloween films. It's in my top 5 easily, but the people just are bitching because it's doesn't have Michael Myers in it. But you need to give it credit, I think, for being a movie that's got things about it that are good, not because it's related to the franchise. And I understand reasoning why you wouldn't like it because it's not related, but still, people need to stop bitching about why this, whether or not this is related or not. It should get, like, at least get some recognition on things that are good, and I think there are a lot of great things in this movie. Like Ellie, I think she's a great character. And I liked how they go on a journey together, like Ellie and Dr. Chalice. They go to Santa Mira, where the dad, Dr. Grimage, or Mr. Grimage was going. And they go into Santa Mira, and I love how this town, you see there's cameras around it, you see all these people watching out from their windows. Everybody is off, and I think that it does give off a cool, creepy atmosphere to this, even though it's in the daytime whenever they drive there. There's such a weird creepiness to it that it works really well in these. And I like how whenever they're seeing all those people, it's funny because Ellie just says, man, I feel like a goldfish. Because, like, they're just literally staring at them, like, really creepily. Like, I really like that. And apparently, in the audio commentary for this, like, it was like that truly. Like, it was a creepy town. Like, people just stared at everybody. And, like, of course it wouldn't be something like what happens in the movie, but people were just, I guess, like, recluses to new people in town. But I just thought that was a really creepy moment of them entering Santa Mira, and it's just everybody staring at them, all these cameras. And then you realize, of course, what the deal is. And I wonder if everybody was in on the fact that what is going to happen with Colonel Cochran and his masks. I don't know if anybody knows, but maybe they might. But everybody, or maybe they're all androids. I don't know. It never explains. But I like that it's very subtle and doesn't explain. I like how whenever Ellie and Dr. Chalice go to that little motel, Ellie is talking to the guy who runs it, and you see him say, oh, there's Colonel Cochran, and like he waves at him, and then you don't see Cochran for the first time. Like you see just his car, you just see the motel owner just waving at him, but you don't see Cochran. It's just a point of view of him looking at him and Ellie. And I like that it gives off a creepy vibe to it, even though he's not like Michael Myers where he's a silent killer. Like, it does a good job of making Cochran this creepy, like you don't whenever you see him, he's so off in a way where like you know there's something up with him. But Dan O'Hurley, who did a great job in this movie, like it feels like he's great at making himself feel like a mystery for this character. Like his character feels very mysterious, and it works just with the actor and I think with the writing. But then, of course, the Cupper family, however you say their name, like little Buddy and the 2 parents, that family is introduced, and I liked how this family is so weird and so strange. The two parents are really, I don't know how to explain it. They're really wacky and really strange to each other, and then Buddy is just a little dick. Like he's a kid, he's an asshole. Like he flips off his mom, like he starts riding his bike, and she's like, "Don't go out in the street. Do you hear me?" And then he just goes like out in front of her while he's riding away. And of course, you know what happens with little Buddy. So I feel like they had to make him a dick. Like you couldn't make him a sympathetic kid, and then have what happens to him later happen. But but I like that this character was a little asshole. Like he was just a piece of shit kid. I mean, besides I guess he's not really that much of a piece of shit. He just flipped his mom off, but like he's just a bratty kid, I guess. But it makes sense because those parents were really odd and just weird. Like not weird in the way creepy. They're just weird, as in they're just kind of an odd group of people. Like they're an odd family. And I liked that this plays into Tom Atkins being a horn dog, where him and Ellie go into the hotel, or the motel, and of course you see with his reaction, he's trying to get in her pants completely, and it's funny because she wants it too, but like it's funny immediately how he's like, yeah, I think I'll just stay out in the car. It'll be better than sleeping on the floor. And then I love this line because it's hilarious and it's just really interesting, where after he says, I'll go sleep in the car, it's better than the floor. And then Ellie just says, where do you want to sleep, Dr. Chalice? And then, of course, he says, that's a really dumb question, Miss Grimbridge. And then they go and fuck. But it's hilarious because it's a great line. I really like that line. It cracks me up every time because it's hokey, but in a way where it's really I just like it a lot. It's a really funny line. And then I like the fact that they have sex like 20 times, and like after that he's like, how old are you? And she's like, I'm older than I look. But it doesn't ever give her age. She looks like she'd be over 21, but I mean, it's always a scary gamble. Like, what if she isn't? But I just like the fact that he's that much of like a person. Like they just like went at it. Like, it's hilarious that they've got a really funny relationship with each other. And I liked how then we get introduced to Marge Gutman, which is a weird last name. This woman who comes in and is annoyed that like her order for the masks was like delayed or messed up or something. And then she has like one of those buttons or those pins that's on the back of the masks. And she goes and stays in one of the motels too. And while they're having sex again, it cuts from that to her like looking at this little pin. And for some reason she uses like a little pin or something to like mess with it. And right whenever she messes with that little pin, like this laser like flies into her mouth, and then it cuts to like Ellie and Dr. Chalice doing it, and she's like, what was that? And then Dr. Chalice just says, oh, who cares? And they just get back to it. And then it cuts to one of the most effective moments in this movie. Holy fuck. Like that scene where Marge Gutman, after the pin lasered into her mouth, you see her mouth is literally like a gaping hole, like this big, this wide out. Or she's just like, and it's ripped, and like her skin is in fragments, like ripped out, and like she's just sitting there like she can't even speak. And then a freaking like giant ass spider just comes out of her mouth, climbs up into her hair, and then for some reason it cuts to her legs where they start shaking. And I don't know if that means that like she's having a spasm and dying, or if that means that the bugs are going to come out, because of course whenever you see the mask, what happens with the masks, you know. But I wonder if that means that the bugs are coming out of her body or something. Like, it didn't explain it, but it just saw like her legs kind of shaking with blanket over it. So I don't know if that meant a spasm or the bugs are going to be released. But I really thought that was one of the most incredible shots in the movie. Incredible effects work. And then Cochran appears after Marge dies, and that's where we actually see a real look at him. And then Dr. Chalice and Ellie are still weary of him, but he's like, oh, Marge will be taken to the best facility at the factory. And then later he says she got shipped off somewhere to another facility. But you know that there's something up. There's still something odd with it. And I liked how after this, like, Ellie and him are literally like, we're gonna go and investigate this factory. And they go to the factory in the daytime and then Ellie finds her father's car being worked on. And then she, of course, in the moment, because her dad died, she's like, oh my god, that's Papa's car. And then she goes up to the car, and then all these androids like stop her. And then I like the fact that the look of I like the look of how Cochran gives, like, he knows, like, they're here for that. Like, they're here for figuring out what happened to the dad. And I like that after that, whenever it becomes night, Ellie is taken, and then Dr. Chalice is on the run. And this is where the movie, even though it was great already, it becomes awesome, where, like, it's him running around this town after curfew, where, like, it's dark, there's androids everywhere following him with some great creepy shots. But Ellie is taken away. Dr. Chalice runs in to makes his way into the building eventually, like running away from the androids, and then there's one android who catches up with him where he punches him in the chest, and then the android starts spilling out stuff out of his mouth, and you still don't know it's an android until now, but he like starts bringing up stuff out of his mouth that's orange, and I think it's like orange juice that was frozen that guy is hacking up. But after that, he pulls out like cords out of his stomach, and like he realizes that he's an android, and then Cochran comes in and tells him about his big plan, which is one of those things where it did feel like something like James Bond, where like this, whenever he did give off his master plan, like about, and I did like this dialogue that Cochran says. It's really good. It's like Dr. Loomis in the first two movies, where like there's a line of dialogue which is like the best dialogue in the movie, where Cochran is talking about Sam Hain, about how long ago it's been since they've had the hills run red, and how they're using it as a sacrificial thing with these kids, where they're going to all be killed and with these masks. And then he goes, and before this quote, you see that Dr. Chalice, trapped by Cochran, goes and watches Buddy and his family get murdered. And that's one of the best things in the movie too, where they go into that room, they shut the door, and then it says test room A. So the family didn't see that when they walked in. But I like the fact that they go in, and then the father character is like, I don't understand why Mr. Cochran won't sign my papers for next year, or for my orders for next year. And I'm just thinking, oh my god, that's gonna be so terrible. And I know, seeing it a million times, I know what happens, but every time it still gets me, because they're in that room. Buddy has the pumpkin mask, puts it on, watches the TV, stares at it, and the pumpkin starts flashing, and then of course the pin starts flashing on his mask, and then he just kind of sits there with the mask on his head shaking, falls down on the ground, all these bugs, snakes come out of his head, and it is incredible. And I love the fact that they kill off a kid, but they made the kid an asshole on purpose, so you didn't feel as much sympathy for him. But still, I'm like, you still cut off a kid, which is effective in movies like this, in horror movies especially, because it's something you don't expect. But then of course he dies, snakes and bugs come out of his mask and his head, and then like the snakes kind of bite the other two, the mom and dad, and they both die. And that was incredibly effective. Like, that works so well. I love that about this movie. And then it has this fantastic cutaway where after they die, it plays the Silver Shamrock theme, of course, like it's played it a million times, which is a great, catchy-ass, annoying theme, but I love it, where it shows all different locations in the U.S. So many kids wearing these masks. Every single location. And it didn't show every location in the U.S., of course, but I mean, it shows like certain locations, like Phoenix, Arizona, I think Tulsa, Oklahoma, like Los Angeles, and it shows all these different locations where the kids are wearing all those masks. So I love the fact that it shows those Buddy get murdered, and then cuts to all of these kids around the country just wearing these masks, and you know the impending doom is going to happen, and it's so incredibly effective with that, with the Silver Shamrock theme, which I didn't mention much, because that theme, I love how it's just London bridges falling down, but it's just using different words. but it is catchy and annoying in a great way. Like, I love how it's so catchy that it bugs me. That's a weird thing to say, but it's such a... It gets into your head, that theme, like, that Happy Happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock, like, that just... It works so incredibly well. But of course, now the impending doom is happening, where you know all these kids are going to be murdered, like, in cold blood completely with these masks. Which is a cool-ass idea that, like, I've never really seen in a movie before, like, just using that type of way of killing off all these kids in the world. And of course, Cochran tells about the Sam Hain story, or Samhain story, and about how his plan, and like Cochran, like, he puts a skull mask on Cochran, or not Cochran, on a Chalice. Names are so similar. He puts the name on the mask on Chalice, and then of course Chalice is sitting in this room tied up, like he's going to be killed too. And then I like the fact that Cochran turns on the TV and it's the ending of Halloween, where Laurie Strode is walking down the street. So they play that theme on the TV while Cochran's trying to escape, which I thought was pretty clever. Pretty clever to keep the Halloween movie connected, even though it's not in the same universe. I thought that was pretty funny. But Chalice, of course, escapes. He gets out, and then he goes and gets Ellie, and Ellie doesn't speak, so something's up with her. She doesn't speak, and then he runs out with her. And I like the fact that they go... What Dr. Chalice's big plan is that he goes into that room where you realize the Stone Age thing is at, where, like, the rock is there, and they're using that to create, like, the stuff for the masks. And him and Ellie go, and he grabs, like, a box full of those pins, and he turns the station to where it'll play with all those androids controlling the TVs. It'll play the Silver Shamrock commercial with the flashing pumpkin, and then he goes up the stairs and drops like a box full of pins, so all of these androids are getting shocked and destroyed and just like die. That was really cool. That was a cool way to have it like he killed off all these androids. And then Cochran, I like the fact that Cochran knows he won, because he just looks up and just goes, and then the Stonehenge rock, like, shocks him, and he just kind of makes a derpy face at the camera, but then he fades away into existence, which is incredibly hokey, because this movie is, of course, hokey, and I feel like that's a big reason, too, why I think a lot of people dislike it, too, because it does have a lot of legit scary moments, but it is very hokey. It has a very similar B-style horror movie. Like, it's really silly, but it's really great. And so Cochran vanishes into thin air. And then after that, Chalice runs away with Ellie. They get in the car, and then you realize Ellie's an android. And it's great, because she, like, chokes him while he's driving, and then he runs into a tree. He, like, goes out and bashes her head in with something, like her robot head. But then the body still goes at him, and I think that it was really great. So he had to fight off another thing, and realizes that Cochran took Ellie from him, and now she's an android. And then it goes full circle to where, after that, Chalice runs back to that gas station at the beginning of the movie. I love how they did that, where it started at the gas station and ended at the gas station. He goes in there, there's kids wearing the masks, the giveaway's about to start. And I like the fact that, of course, this is really silly. Like, how could you do this even in 1982, where Chalice calls the station or something and says, like, you gotta turn off the TV, millions will die, please listen to me. They turn off 2 of the channels with the with the pumpkin thing, and then they have one left, and he's like, no, you gotta turn off the last station. The last station, it still has it on there. Please, millions will die, please. And I love the fact that it ends with him just saying, stop it, and like it just cuts. So you don't know if every kid died in the world, or basically every kid died in the world. apparently it was probably what it is, because Tommy Lee Wallace, in something I read, said that, who's the director, he said that he wanted screams of children heard during the credits, which would imply that they all died, but he wanted to make it more ambiguous and didn't do that. So I'm guessing his intent was that they died. but man, having, even though you don't see it, having a movie where it's an apocalyptic end of all these, literally all the kids in the world being murdered, like that just, this movie has so many creative things about it that give no credit at all, because this isn't a Michael Myers movie, which again just pisses me off, because it's just so unfair that you can have a movie like this that gives off, like, that is ballsy and gives off something different than what you got before it, but people are so mad. It's like all these movies and franchises do this, where like if the movie is a tiny bit different, and I know this is drastically different, I'm not saying this one, but if a movie in a franchise, say like Star Wars, like every Star Wars movie after the original trilogy is lambasted because it's a little different, or because it tries to do something different, but fans just can't have it. It's just like with this franchise. It's like this movie, and I know that this movie now has a cult following and people love it now, a lot of people, but when this came out, this was repulsed, and you couldn't even, like, I feel like if you said you like this, like, you'd be afraid to say that in front of people, because it's just was so hated. And I don't know, I wasn't born in 82 or alive in 82, but I feel like going into this in 1982, if you said you liked this, I feel like you would, like, people would, if people were that big of a fan of this franchise, they couldn't stand you. So I'm really curious to what it was like in 1982. I feel like I know, but I wasn't there. But this movie just, like I said, gives such creative ideas. It's such a unique movie. It gives off, it's more Halloween than the first film, or any of the films, honestly. And that's totally fine, because it gives off such a unique film, such a fun, unique B-movie type film, with similarities to things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because like the androids are kind of similar to that. But the similarities, to me, I feel like are more homages. Like they feel like they're its own thing, as opposed to like completely copying something. So overall, this one is just a fantastic and one of the most underrated like sequels I've ever heard of. Like, I know it's not connected, I know it's not trying to be, but man, just give it the recognition it deserves for at least some things about it. Even if you hate the movie, you can at least find some stuff I think that you might like. But God, the fans are just so horrible. Like, it's just any franchise fandom, it's just the worst, no matter what. But overall, man, this movie, just rewatching it again, I really love it. I think that it just gives off such a great vibe. It's such a fun time. It always, no matter what, I always enjoy watching it. No matter if it's related to the other films or not, because fucking that's so stupid. I don't get it. So overall, I think this one's great, and it's a interesting one-off black sheep of the franchise.